Welcome back, guys, to the World Class Show. I'm Ricky.
This is Gabe.
Jalen.
And we are happy to be back. It's been a very long minute. I think we had our off season, even though we said that we're going to not do an off season.
We're in preseason now.
Yeah, we're kind of warming up now.
We might be a little bit rough on the edges, you know what I mean? Getting those touches, trying to practice and whatnot. But
pretty bad. But sorry, guys, we were trying to bring out more shows, but we got really busy with some other stuff that came up for World Class, so that's actually a good thing for us.
Yes.
Got some big events coming up very soon, and we can't wait to share it with all of you guys. So, but how you been, kid?
Man, I've been good, busy, very happy with what we've been doing with World Class. I mean, to kind of recap, we've been doing a few shows, and then we went to Miami, worked with Miami for a little bit.
Yes.
So
shout out to Miami FC.
Shout out Miami FC. Mm-hmm. Check out the blog. I mean, that kind of tells a little bit of what we've been up to lately.
Just keep up with that.
But man, life is good. Just chilling. Excited to be back with the show and try to be.
Yes.
I mean, even though we hang out all the time, it's kind of different when you're like at the table and talking footy and stuff. So
yeah, for sure.
Been good, man.
What about you?
Good. I don't know why this makes me feel a little nervous because it's been so long, but
we haven't really introduced the new studio too.
Yeah, we're at a different location, as you guys can see. It's weird. Normally, we're on the opposite side of this studio set, so I guess that's why I'm nervous, but it feels good. I feel good. I'm happy, like you said, to be doing everything we've been doing.
Yeah.
Performing in front of a live audience. That's probably what it's got me a little worried.
We do have a little.
Don't worry, Christian is still behind the cameras too as well, so he's still here for us. But we have a very special for you guys today, and but also I also want to mention that this is probably maybe his 5th time wearing this jersey on the show.
Count it up, because I need to wear it 100 times more.
I think you should wear it more. To be honest.
This guy, he's wearing a farmer's outfit because Farmers League tradition.
Stop.
So, I mean, just saying, I'll wear it 100 times more. Count it up. Leave it in the comments. I'm not keeping track. Clearly, you guys are.
I got my 9 to 5 outfit today. Like it's just.
We just got off the clock. Just got off the clock. Come on, man. At least we are actually filming now this time. The amount of times we were.
The field, bro. That's.
All right. Well, crazy. Like I said, we have a special show for you today, guys. We have a special guest today too. She's here to talk about her own brand. Talk about a little bit the Women's World Cup that's going on right now. I think we're already a weekend with the Women's World Cup.
Just about, yeah.
Yep. So, but for her brand, she's got a lot to talk about: body, mind, and what?
Performance, baby.
Performance.
Come on now.
So let's introduce Emily to the show. Please welcome Emily to the show. Woo! Yes.
Welcome.
How are you?
Doing well.
Swell.
Good.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Of course, we were happy to have you on the show here to talk about a little bit more about about your brand, what you got doing on with the Jacksonville community, and then also a little bit more about the Women's World Cup too, which is going on right now. But we want to start off by just introduce yourself. Who you are, where you're from, and then also what you do.
Yeah. Well, my name is Emily Tillman, so I own the company Body Mind Performance, and essentially what that is the 3 pillars, which is technical soccer coaching, strength conditioning, and then mental performance. I mostly work with high school athletes, middle school athletes, so it ranges from 8 to 18 right now, and preparation is whatever their goal is, whether that be making a varsity team, making college, and so on. So originally I'm from England. Kind of came up through the youth system there, and then when I was 16 to 18, played for Chelsea.
Nice.
But I am a Liverpool fan. Well, people that are always so disappointed when I'm not a Chelsea fan, so I have to slide that in there now.
Okay.
Read the fine print.
Read the fine print. And then came over to the States on a full scholarship to play in Alabama, which was a little bit different from London. Bit of a culture shock. And then, but unfortunately, my second year managed to dislocate both my kneecaps at the same time, so had a career-ending injury. But the silver lining of that was I was kept on as a coach, so that was kind of how. It wasn't called BMP at the time, but that's how the idea of BMP was kind of born, because I kind of started doing some private stuff on the side in doing the college coaching, and I thought college coaching was what my career was going to be, but I kind of preferred the private stuff. And then my undergraduate degree was psychology, and obviously during that time I was getting a lot of physical help from the physios and whatnot, but none on the mental side. So that's how I got into sports psychology, did my masters, and that's kind of how the kind of idea of BMP was born. And then I was in a long distance relationship with my husband. We moved down. We were apart for 3 years whilst I was studying in England. Then I moved back over here, and then we moved to Jacksonville. And
Nice.
yeah.
Did you ever hear about Jacksonville before?
Sort of. My husband's from Gainesville, so I kind of knew, but British people only know Orlando. So I'd been
Not Miami?
Yeah, Miami a little bit, but I've been to Disney World like 3 times. So when I went to Alabama, I thought like everywhere was a bit like Disney World, and I was a bit disappointed once I realised that was not the case.
Just imagine it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I didn't know
crazy.
too much about Jacksonville, but my parents and I had actually like gone on like a vacation as we went through Jacksonville once, and I was like, this place is cool. And then we ended up obviously moving here, which was fun. So
Nice.
yeah, I love Jacksonville.
Welcome to Jacksonville.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you want to ask about the transition?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so like, first of all, like, what Alabama to London is insane of a transition. So
Yes.
like, what connected you there in the first place?
Honestly, so when we were at Chelsea, there was about 12 of us, because bear in mind, obviously we're talking about the Women's World Cup and whatnot, like the WSL that's now in England was not the same that it is now. So for me, it's very cliched, but when I was like 7, I'd watched Bending Like Beckham, and I was like, that's what I wanted to go do. But my mum was very much about, you know, the education side of things, and obviously the dual career aspect for girls is still very, you know, you kind of have to work and play at the same time. So for me, it was always like, okay, America made more sense, because in England, if you play for your team and you go to university, those two things are separate. So America was always the dream for me, even though I was at Chelsea. But then we had probably, like, there was about 12 of us that wanted to go. And so from that, obviously being in Chelsea, being in London, like we got a fair amount of coaches like coming and looking at us. Right. And then it was kind of between the coaches at Troy and St. Leo were my top choices, and they both kind of offered me the same deal. And to me, it was just like connected more with those coaches. Like I just felt like they were more who I wanted to work with and work for. So that was kind of how I ended up at Troy. But I didn't even like Google it or anything. Like I literally, I literally like was just like, oh, it's D1, like let's go. And now obviously being on the other side of it, it's hilarious because the amount of ID camps they go to and the amount of times you meet the you know. And I mean, me and my roommate and now best friend, we laugh because we walked in on photo day. Like we literally walked in on media day. That was our first day on the campus. Yeah. So that was what took me there. But the difference is obviously culturally, obviously in Alabama was very different. London obviously has got a lot to do. The place I was literally had a Publix. Like that was like, oh my gosh. We had a highway, basically. There was a movie theatre and that was about it. But the good part of that was that, you know, it forced us, like whenever we did have a weekend off or whatever, that we would go out and kind of explore more parts of America and that stuff. Yeah.
What was the football like there at Alabama?
It was pretty good. The biggest difference I noticed from like day one was that the Americans were more athletes than England. So in England, when in my preparation, I like went and trained with my local like ladies team. So like the team Plymouth Argyle, they just got promoted to the championship, but so they won League Below Premier League. And they just made their first £1 million signing, which everyone's freaking out about. Nice. But yeah, so that was my academy that I grew up with before Chelsea. So I went back and trained with like the first team and the reserves in order to prep. So obviously like fairly decent standard, and like I was like, oh my god, I'm so fit. And I came out here and I was probably like 13th, 14th in the squad in fitness, because I just, you know, I say it to my players all the time, you can't train for the heat without being in the heat. So that was the biggest thing where I was just like, I just remember being hunched over in pre-season being like, there's no air. Like there's actually no air here. Like, you know, so the athletic side I would say was probably the biggest difference initially, just because a lot of them were like multi-sport. Like our right back, she was also doing track, like at D1, you know, is kind of crazy. So I just felt like the Americans were more like machines. And then I would say the biggest thing for me, which I do think has changed now, was just like, for me, my thing was like, soccer was my passion, you know, so I had a team and I grew up and obviously went to the games every weekend, whereas like a lot of my teammates didn't even support a team, like they didn't have a team, like it was just like, oh, I support US kind of thing. So that part was quite weird for me. Like I was like, well, I'm like, what about the club? Yeah, like who's your favorite player? Like, you know, so that was and like I said, I think the youth is like now has changed a bit, but that was probably the biggest differences off the cuff that I noticed. But yeah, and then obviously, but I mean, we have nothing like what we have here in the college system in England that can really even compare. Like, I took a bunch of kids over to England just in June to train with some Premier League, like at some facilities. But then we did a university tour, and that was great for them to see. But they were like, they were impressed in terms of the program, but in terms of facilities, they were like, because they're used to seeing like your collegiate system, and that was one of our best in England, and it just doesn't even compare. Yeah, it does not even close. Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people probably think the same, but it's like we don't think about that. It's
right,
like, it's
right.
a huge shock. We always think that they're, especially when it comes to football, that top of the art.
Yeah. And I think like obviously if you're playing for an academy and everything, it's great, but I think like the colleges, so to speak, in England, like it honestly, some of your high schools are way better, like way better.
Wow.
Yeah, bigger, better.
That's insane.
1 point American.
I wanted to ask, what about tactically, like on the field? You know, because when you watch Premier League and then you watch the MLS, or even you watch the U.S. men's national team play or women's national team, and then you watch England play, it's totally different. The way that they move the ball, the way they move on the field. So how was that?
Yeah, I would say that was probably maybe a slightly different change in the sense of like, again, going back to being a fan was like the watching of it. So there was quite a lot, like our head coach was Irish and our head coach was Canadian, our assistant was Irish. And so we had like kind of grown up watching it. So tactically, I felt like we just had, but if they said something, we were like, oh yeah, we know, we can see that kind of thing. But sometimes like some of the soccer IQ was maybe a little bit less just because they hadn't watched it as much. So we had 5 English on our team, and that wasn't like I wouldn't necessarily say that it wasn't like, oh, we were way better or anything like that, but I would definitely say tactically there was aspects where I was like, oh yeah, we're familiar with this, whereas when it got into like the deep, like more complex tactics, a couple of my players, like one of my best friends who actually lives here, she was saying like that was over my head, like we'd never really addressed that much like tactical stuff before. We just kind of relied a little bit more on our athleticism. So that was probably one of the biggest differences in terms of like coming from England over here, just because I think it was more, once you got to that collegiate level, it was a little bit more in depth and a little bit, you know, and obviously it's more intense because you're doing it like every day and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I do want to ask about when you came over to Alabama. You came for the last 2 years or just all 4 years?
I was here for all 4 years. Yeah, I've managed. So when I got injured, we actually had a change of head coach in the injury, which was fun. But he honoured the fact that I, you know, was like I'd been on the sidelines and done that stuff. So they allowed me to finish out with the people I started with. So
that happened your senior year, or?
It happened going into my sophomore year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So early.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And that's why I kind of want to ask about like something like that, because you are coming from England to Alabama. The mentality throughout the whole process, like how were you able to dig yourself out of that hole? Like there's injuries, you're away from home. Like what was the mentality that you had going through that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I honestly feel like I was on autopilot. So I feel like because I did it both legs, I had to have 3 surgeries. So it was kind of like, let's just get through this one, then I can walk on that one, then I can bend that one, let me do the next one. So my mind, when it happened, was not that it was a career-ending injury. My mind was, I'm just coming back and this is just another challenge kind of thing. So it was 9 months almost to the day of like when it happened to when I got back on a treadmill. And in that time, like I said, I was very much in denial. I had a bit of I think what helped me was the purpose of that I had something to do on the sidelines, so to speak. But for me, it didn't really cross my mind to ever go home, and I don't really know why, because I get asked that quite a lot. It was just more like, oh, well, we're just like, I'm not going home, like this is what I've worked for like forever. And then I was just thinking, okay, you know, next challenge, that kind of thing. But then once like the new head coach came in, the ultimatum on the table for me was, you either take this coaching job or you go home. Like, and he didn't want to give me the opportunity to try and come back, which in hindsight is the right decision, because I couldn't have come back to the level of what I was before. But obviously at the time I was like, well, what if I can, you know? So, but I was like, do I want to risk that and then like go back to England and, you know, start again, that kind of thing. So in hindsight it was the right decision, but I didn't really, I wouldn't say I tell this story all the time in terms of like, with sports psychology, we always talk about sport identity and like that identity when you like retire or when you know, or you're injured or whatever. And for me, like I went straight into a new identity as a coach, and I was still in America, and I'm from a really small town. So like I was the girl that played football. So that I still kind of kept that identity to a degree. So when I went home, and then I had to move home, and I basically had to do like an undergraduate degree in 1 year because the British Psychology Association and stuff like didn't recognize mine and all of this stuff. So I moved back home, and I remember I was working in a bar, and these like random high schoolers like came in and was like, Emily, like, and like straight away I just like went, oh no, I'm just doing this like 10 minutes. And like I was like, why have I just done this? It's so embarrassing. Like, and like they were like, okay, we just asked for a drink. And I told them like my whole life story, and that was harder for me, like moving home, like after graduation, after all that, like even though I like accomplished something in the sense of like I graduated and did all that stuff, that was harder for me, and that was more of an identity shift because then I wasn't coaching, like, and I wasn't the girl that went to America kind of thing. I was just like Emily working in a bar, even though I was doing my masters and that kind of stuff. And now it seems so stupid, but at the time it was like that was way more of like an identity shift for me and harder for me than it was like when I was right there, because I don't think I really processed it when I was there because I just jumped straight into the coaching thing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, I mean it's definitely because like we all go through those phases, especially when I went to college, and my first 2 years I wasn't getting enough playing time, and then eventually I got redshirted. So then I was like, okay, I'm not happy. Like I had the same situation where I was going to a school that was in the middle of nowhere, and like you said, like there's like a movie theater, and then like 30-minute drive or maybe like an hour drive, you go to a Buffalo Wild Wings, and it's like, okay, like I have to do this every single time for an enjoyable weekend. Right. So I was like, okay, like I really don't want to be here anymore. But looking back at it, I was like, okay, I could have just stayed there, enjoyed my 4 years, and really just push through and possibly maybe transfer to another school rather than just come back. And kind of the same situation, I just started working at a restaurant, but I was as a bus boy. So I'm cleaning up tables, and I see my buddy, he's like, Ricky, what you doing here? I was like, nothing. I'm just doing this for like this one day thing. But it was like that feeling of like I felt like I disappointed myself, all that stuff. But it's like you kind of have to push yourself through those tough times, and like situation like that's extreme. So I think for our listeners, I think it's important, especially if you're a young player that's trying to make it to the next level. I think that's something that it's important to hear, especially if you want to, everyone's going to go through it. Right. So I think it's something that we want to share as much as possible on the show. 100%. I think it's almost finding some form of purpose, like, and that might not be like going full on into coaching, but I feel like the hardest part when you're injured is that separation from the team. So I feel like people then go completely away, where they're completely away from the team, and then they're not, but I'd always I even say it to my younger players now, I'm like, even if you can just go on the sidelines, like try and experience it with the team as much as you can, or find some purpose of like, if you think about sports takes up so much of your time, and then a lot of the time you have other hobbies that you might not just like kind of neglect, like that. I feel like that's a good time to kind of tap into that, just to keep your mind kind of like occupied as well, because I definitely think the purpose aspect helped me in terms of like the coaching was my focus, and obviously I had school and that kind of stuff as well. But I think for me it was more like this had been a lifelong thing of me moving. I think if it happened in England, I probably would have gone home, like, because I think it was more like, well, I'm in America, it's not like, and obviously it was like paid for and that kind of stuff, so all of that factors into it. So but obviously my mom was just like, come home, and I was like, no. So did you and your best friend that you went to school with, you guys are friends now, right? She literally was like the ceremony leader for my wedding and everything. Nice. And actually awesome. She's probably the reason why I stayed, because she was the person. That was my question. It was like, was she also a big factor of like 100%. Supporting you and all that stuff? She was incredible. So she was literally carrying me to bed at one point because I couldn't walk. So she 100% is the reason like why I stayed. She kept me sane, and shout out to your friend. What's her name? Kirsten Rendell. Nice. You're a good friend for carrying her too.
Do you mind going into a little bit of detail into what your coaching role was as soon as you were offered that like position? Because in my mind, being a sophomore offered a coaching role, you have to coach players that are much older than you. How do you establish that, leadership and kind of respect?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing was definitely, well, kind of like, obviously I would hear things because I'm a player by friendship, in my friendship group, you know, so it was kind of navigating, like, you know, sometimes I get asked, like, what's that person doing? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you that. Like, but so I had to kind of, you know, like, be that kind of dual role kind of thing. And to be fair, the coaching staff did a good job of, like, respecting that. But my main role was, like, if we did more functional stuff, like, in small groups, so I was a midfielder, so a lot of the time, like, I would take the midfielders now and again. But most of it was, like, the background stuff of just the preparation stuff, if they had it, you know, that kind of stuff, and, like, more the preparation for away trips, that stuff. Yep. So like the actual hands-on coaching, I wouldn't say I was doing that much stuff. I was really just trying to absorb as much as possible, and that's when I got into like more of the private stuff, so I could kind of apply that. But my main role was more like I feel like I was kind of the person to try and keep the morale as well, that kind of stuff. So with the psychology aspect, that I loved doing that stuff. And I mean, Kirsten is like team morale, so like the two of us together were kind of, you know, and we actually didn't have a huge senior class at the time, so, and we had a huge freshman class that came in, so that kind of made my life a little bit easier where I was still seen as a bit older. So yeah, I would say my primary role was probably more just that like liaison between the coach and the player. Like one of the good ideas that the coach had was he would have like small little groups, and there was like a freshman little group and a leader established in each class. So like my job was to kind of like orchestrate that, and then we, you know, because sometimes, you know, a lot of coaches will say, you know, the open door policy, but it's still a little intimidating to walk into a head coach and say, this is what we want, kind of thing. So that was his kind of way of like having a forum to be able to do that. So I would kind of be the one that would like bounce those ideas back to him and that kind of stuff. So it kind of works. I mean, we had our winningest, is that the right word? Season whilst we were there, in that sophomore year. So it was pretty good. Cool. Yeah. So that was fun. But yeah.
We'll get that credit.
No, that's all you. That's not to me. That's not to me. We had some great players. So
nice.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you played in the midfield. Mm-hmm. So if it's possible, are you able to kind of go into like how your injury happened? I know to me it's just kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah. So I know if you're squeamish, don't mute this part. No. So basically, our strength conditioning coach Ryan, he's a great guy. This was an accident, not his fault. But basically, I mean, he's 6 foot, big American football dude. Couldn't kick a soccer ball to save his life, but wanted to learn. So we did 2 workouts. We used to come back like a month earlier to get acclimatized to the heat. And so we'd done 2 workouts that day. We're out on the turf on the American football field. And we had the choice of frisbee or soccer, and I wish I'd chosen frisbee now. And so we're like, all right, we'll do pickup. And basically, because he didn't know anything about soccer, like one of the girls just said, Ryan, Mark, Emily. And so he was basically just following me around. And someone played like a through ball, and we went on an all-out sprint, and I overextended my left leg, but I collided with him. And then so I dislocated the left one on the collision, but the impact was quite hard, so I kind of jumped and I landed on my right leg. But my right leg, like my mum was in the Navy and she dislocated her kneecap twice. And when I was like 13, I was jogging backwards and there was like a pothole on the field, and I twisted it. So, and at the time the doctors had said like, oh, your patella sits quite high. So when I extend my leg, my patella wants to move a little bit more than an average kneecap. So there was already a weakness there, but obviously I didn't really know the full extent. So I basically damaged like the patella ligament, snapped it in both legs, chipped my patella on my right knee, and tore my meniscus.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not playing pickup ever again. I didn't want to hear that.
I heard pothole.
It's not the story that I was expecting.
Yeah, no. So it was like total freak accident, and so it was just like it was just one of those things. Unfortunately, bad timing. And poor Ryan, he also went to then go get me some cookies. I'm allergic to peanuts, and he bought all peanut cookies.
Double whammy, man.
Poor guy,
man. I thought we were friends, but maybe not. But yeah, so but no, he's a great guy, and obviously felt awful about it. But
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all things do happen for a reason.
I agree.
That's insane, though.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, that's insane. Anyways, to get our minds off of freak injuries, do you mind just going a little bit in depth, or just tell us about BMP? Like, what is BMP?
Yeah.
How did it start? How did you end up here?
Yeah.
All that good stuff.
Yeah, so obviously we moved down here, and then I was like, well, I don't really know anybody, so I wasn't really sure how to like get it going. Because my thing was like, okay, I'll get all the qualifications first, and then we'll kind of go from there. So the CSCS with the strength conditioning part was like, that took me a little while to just, because I didn't really have any hands-on experience with that, and I hadn't been in a gym and that kind of stuff. So once we moved, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to start on Instagram. I'm just going to start basically sharing little knowledge nuggets of each part, like every day. So that's what I did, and then through that, like, it was just weird timing in terms of just enough, well, sort of the right people, I guess, saw it at the right time. And then, so, I mean, I'm quite an impatient person, so I'd like started BMP in like January, and I remember in February, I was like, I haven't got any clients, and my husband was like, it's been a month, like, you need to chill, like, you need to chill out. And so I got this one kid that came out, and we like literally did a little mental performance session, and then it was kind of like from there, like, you know, they told a teammate, and then it just kind of grew.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, yeah. It was honestly like, I mean, I've obviously done little bits of marketing here and there, but word of mouth has 1000% been the main driver. So, so it was just kind of like, it's kind of changed a little bit. Before it was like, if we did mental performance, like if you do 30 minutes of mental performance, we do 30 minutes technical, but now it's like, it's kind of, we fit it to the individual. So some might come if they're already doing technical with some other trainers, or they're already getting a lot of technical with club, then we just do 45 to an hour of full mental. Or now we combine the strength stuff. The strength stuff, like you guys saw, we typically do it in like a group setting, but the mental is strictly one-to-one, just because of like, just so that they can open up a little bit more. I feel like we can address it in workshops and stuff, and I've done team workshops, but the one-to-one I find is way more effective. And then obviously the technical piece, I think especially for the kids, is just like, it kind of reinforces some of their points. So we typically, like, for example, if you've got a striker that's just like, I was scoring all these goals and now I'm like struggling in front of goal, like we'll address that, where's that confidence not coming from, and that stuff, and then but then put them in some shooting drills where we're putting them under pressure and that kind of stuff. So I feel like it sticks a little bit more if we do that. But yeah, so we've just kind of like grown quite authentically over we're in our 3rd year now, so we're at the point where I've hired some staff, and we're in the process of trying to sponsor one of my good friends who will come on and do more of the director of mental performance side of things. So she's completing her PhD, and I think now it's just at the point of finding the right people that represent the brand in the right way, and like that have that connection with the kids in the same way. So
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it's a long story. Definitely started from the bottom for sure, and especially that first player. Like, how was that first experience? Like that one player. Like, how was it?
It's so funny because she's still with me now.
Oh, really? That's good.
Still with me now. She
That's a good
literally
sign. Way to
every
stay
single-
loyal.
She's literally, she came to England. Like, yeah. So
Nice.
it was funny because it was like, I was like, how am I going to get people in? So I like did like a giveaway thing, and I pretended like there was so many people, but there was literally like 2 people in this giveaway. So one was probably like my mom.
You know
like,
what they say, fake it till you make
right,
it. You know what I mean?
Like, I had to literally ask one of my old teammates that lived here, and I was like, we need to go out and do some drills, and I'm just gonna like, you know, make it look like we've got loads of people.
Yeah.
So that's what we did.
Just put the shirt on.
But yeah, so
Nice.
put the shirt on, yeah. But no, so she's still with me now, and so she literally has basically come every single Monday for like nearly 3 years. So
Wow.
so that first one was a little daunting, but I feel like you know, it's been fun. You kind of learn on the go, and so yeah, it's just like I said, I feel like the soccer community is very good at, you know, talking. So you know, I feel you know, and I feel like it's quite a connected community, especially within their own teams and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how it kind of went twofold, was like you start working with one player and then you end up with 6 on the same team and that kind of stuff. So I try to stay as neutral as possible, just because I feel like I want to make sure like I'm trying to serve everybody kind of thing as best I can, rather, you know, obviously there's a shortage on female coaches, so a lot of the time clubs are, hey, do you want to come coach? And it would be great, but I feel like if you coach, I can't really be talking to someone about confidence and then be coaching my team against them on a Saturday, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I just feel like it's not, you know,
just be calm on the field and then on the other side, destroy her!
So it doesn't really work. And I feel like my thing is like my true thing of what I really feel is like the development is what I really enjoy. So I feel like I'm not having to, obviously I want them to go and win on the weekend, but like my job is not reliant on that. It's reliant on their growth as an individual. So I quite, you know, enjoy that aspect probably the most.
Has anybody graduated and gone to college?
No, not yet. Okay. So my youngest ones are in that process right now. So I've got a kid right now that I'm working with. She's off to college in 2 weeks, but she's like a transfer, so I can't take credit for that one. Oh. She moved up from Fort Lauderdale, and we've just been doing some conditioning with her for 8 weeks.
Stop it.
So
put it there.
She was already committed. She was already committed. So I got a couple of my OGs that are basically trying to compete to be the first people to be signed from BMP. So we'll see. Then. We'll see who pips to the post. Yeah.
But that's what you want, right? You want that certification of all those, so that people know, like, okay, if they made it to these schools or this professional team, hopefully, then we know to go to you.
Yeah. And like I said before, I feel like everyone's like goals are different. I think that's probably one of the biggest differences here is obviously, you know, in England, if you're coming up, like pro is like your option, you know. So if you're in an academy, okay, you're straight away, it's like we're separated in terms of, okay, you might have a chance, but we all know like how slim that chance is. Whereas here, it's more of a believable and achievable goal to get to college, whether that's D3, D1, whatever. So I feel like there's more. It's quite intense, like from quite a young age here, because there is like an more attainable goal that kind of carries the same weight as the pro. Yeah. So like my friend that works at Chelsea, she's like the player care manager. Like she's like, it's really weird. Like when we're talking, it's quite similar, even though it's quite different in terms of what the end goal is. Like we're talking about U23, U18 Chelsea players, like probably going to have a career in football. Yeah. Whereas ours is like, well, they might go to college and then completely do a different career. So it's kind of different in that there's quite a lot more pressure at an earlier age here, I think, in sport. And sometimes that can be quite intense, you know. So that's probably one of the other big differences. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, I love what you're doing because as I was an athlete. I didn't play football. I played basketball, but still, even when I was, growing up, I wish I would have had a mental coach. And it's so important nowadays with, mental health being at the, at the height of everything. Like, you're underperforming or you're just not feeling great. Right. It could be like a mental health issue that you're just not having a great day and whatnot. And it's so important to take care of your mental and to have a professional to, I'm not bagging those goals, like what's going on, and you're getting to the root of that problem at such a young age. It's impressive to me, and I love what you're doing. So
thank you.
It's
well, that was my kind of thing, was like, I always tell the kids, I'm like, I just think I would have enjoyed it more. Like, I was like, I loved the sport, I was passionate about sport, but like, I was way more effective in training than I was in games, and I couldn't work it out. And I had like, now I'm like, I was just like super nervous. I would have state anxiety. Like, if I just learned how to breathe probably, like it probably would have been a lot more, And like, but one of the cool things is that when I first started it, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like, stereotypically, if any like boys are gonna come and work with a female coach and then talk about the feelings, and actually I've pretty much got a fairly even split right down the middle.
Really?
So and so really I think that's kudos to like the parents and the players, so, and they're quite open, and obviously you're kind of, it's linking it to the sport, but I always say to the kids, and it's always like, it's called mental skills, so I'm like, but we're not taught that, and like, so now it's like, I feel like one of the things that I'm trying to do now is like, in that kind of liaison point with the clubs, is like trying to teach the teacher almost, in terms of like helping because I can't be in a million places at once, obviously, but kind of educating the coaches on different ways that they can incorporate that into their sessions, and just being aware of like different people are going to respond for different things, and one size doesn't fit all, so you've got to kind of try and adapt to, and it's not about changing everything, because you can't, on the flip side, you can't coddle too much, you know what I mean? So there's a balance. There's a balance of like, it's still, if you want to make it, it's going to be a pressure in an environment. It's more giving you the coping strategies to know how to handle that, rather than protecting you completely from never experiencing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, if, a player, are you like you're not on an on-call basis? Like if you need, to have that one-on-one session, you have to kind of go through a booking appointment, or are you like, hey Emily, like I'm really struggling right now, I feel really nervous, can you help me real quick? I got a game in like an hour, like you know.
Yeah, so for the most part it's the booking appointment, but obviously I'm usually aware of the big things that are going on, like big tournaments or whatever, and so there'll be those players, like especially if it's like that, you know, tryout or you know, big huge tournament, or scouts are looking at them or whatever, where I'll just be like, look, just text me, just call me, like if it, you know, if you need that. My ultimate goal with them though is to try and give them what we call the toolbox, so that you're taught, like my job on the mental side is to work myself out of a job basically, so it's like it's so that you're not having to be that dependent, and if it is, that's fine because it happens, but it's more that practicing. It's like, you know, you wouldn't go on a physical skill, like if you, I don't know, you're learning the Ronaldo chop and do it once and then never try it again. You know what I mean? So like, it's kind of like you would rehearse, and then do it in training, do it in practice. So I'm always saying the same thing, like, you know, we'll have a discussion and then it's like, did you do that? Well, did you do that? Did you practice? No. So, you know, so it's kind of like my job is to try and get them to a point where they don't need me because they've got the tools and they've practiced and they know they're effective. But obviously that's, you know, best case scenario. So they can, if, you know, if they need me, they can let me know.
That's awesome.
How oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask, like, because it sounds like, did you start this before COVID or after COVID?
Kind of during. So
how was that?
So I don't know. I was a bit crazy doing that, but
it was the best ideas came during COVID. Like everybody.
I know.
That would explain the first month.
Like,
through webcam, because did you do webcams and all that stuff as well, or no?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. I mean, I absolutely do not enjoy doing consultations over Zoom. I just feel it's just awkward, and it's just like, and there's a thing in terms of like your training where it's like you got to be comfortable with silence, but that is just like too much, like because you can't read people, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just awkward. Way prefer face to face. Like, you know, everyone's always saying about making it online, and I was like, I just prefer being in the room, you know, with people. So but yeah, so it was 2020, January 2020 basically. I'd got a bit impatient by that point, so I thought, let's try. And obviously with Florida was kind of like open back open then, so people were still training and whatnot, so I thought we'll give
Florida.
it. I know all my friends who in England were like in a serious lockdown for a very long time, and they were like, what are you doing?
I think we were in lockdown for like 2 weeks,
like,
and I was back at the beach,
like,
like, I'm not missing out on this weather.
So yeah, it was during that time, and then obviously it didn't really feel like, because we were in the main bit of, well, I don't know what you can call the main bit of COVID, but the first part we were in Atlanta, so so, and then we moved down here. So,
Gotcha. I mean, you did mention like you mostly done it in Jacksonville too. Like, was there any point that you were like, okay, I want to maybe move to Orlando, or maybe go to more of like a soccer city? Because Jacksonville is still growing right now, but it's not known as the soccer city just yet.
Right.
Was there any time in your life that where you thought about that?
Not really. No, I mean, I just love Jacksonville.
Nice.
I just like,
Nice.
I really love Jacksonville. I don't know. Like, I meet people that don't, and I'm like, why?
But you see the opportunity.
And I just feel like this is like I've moved around so much, like just from in England, States, that kind of stuff, and like this is definitely the first place where I've really been like, this is home. And so like all my family love it. You know, my plan is to get my mum to move over here, that kind of stuff. So so for me, it wasn't. For me, it was more like, I preferred that, because then I feel like if I can grow and then we can grow, it's kind of like, I feel like if we've got good people like yourselves, like that kind of stuff, like everyone grows up, you know what I mean? Rather than, and like hopefully Jacksonville can be in that conversation in 5 years time or whatever, you know? Awesome. So I think that's where, and I'm kind of like from a small town and that kind of stuff, so I feel like I kind of have that small town kind of mentality in that sense of like, let's make it on like bigger, you know?
Yeah, so, and that's perfect, because it's like, the football community needs people like you, and there's more accessibility to, like Gabe said, not only the physical training side, but the mental side. And so it's really cool that you're putting the anchor down now and looking through the future. So, like, with that being said, what do you see next for BMP?
I think the biggest thing is building the right team around us, just because obviously the kids have to go to school, so we have a limited amount of hours that we can work with, and that's, you know, it's a good problem to have, but we're kind of at that max capacity now in terms of making sure like then we're in a good spot to hire more people, but then the next thing would just be having our own space that we can kind of call our own, where we can do everything that we want to be able to do, and then, you know, I just like, you know, I want to be the main thing for soccer players where they're like, okay, if we need any type of that service, like we go to BMP, you know. So I think the nice thing is that I'm not territorial in the sense of like, if you were coming to work with me but you worked with someone else, I'm like, if you're coming to do mental but you're already happy with your technical coach, I'm like, go for it, you know, like I'm like, that's fine, like, because I just feel like at the end of the day, if we're about the development of the kid, like if you think that's working, then you should stick with it. Don't fix something that's not broken, you know what I mean? Yeah. But if you feel like you can add something, so I think the nice part of my thing is that I have the 3 pillars, so it's kind of like, okay, well, what do you need or what is missing? Can we fill that gap? If you're already getting that gap filled somewhere else, that's fine. Like we'll make it work, and trying to work more together with people instead of as separate entities, you know, so
that again is something else that the football community here needs, especially just that unity across different clubs, different trainers, all that
100%.
stuff,
And that's what like Nawal and I have talked about before. Like my whole story was like, when I got into Chelsea was because I didn't get into Arsenal. So I got through to the last stage of the Arsenal trials. In between, I'd broken my collarbone, so I literally showed up to the final trials with shoulder pads on. Mortifying. And so like one of my best friends that played with me at Chelsea was like, I literally remember you walking into the changing room and thinking, what is this girl doing? Like, is she meant to be at the rugby trials? Like, what is going on? So needless to say, didn't make it. Obviously was distraught because I was just like, I had my heart set on I'm leaving, I'm moving to London. But the Arsenal coach had literally called up and said, look, we've got like a handful that were on the cusp. Do you want to take a look at them? And the Chelsea like trials were done, and they took a look at us, and we got in. So, and it was just like, you know, calling around and just moving around. And like when we went over in the summer, like it was that same thing of like a lot of the coaches are connected. And even, you know, one of the friend that works at Chelsea, they were at the MLS Cup in IMG, so I went down there. And you've got like Man United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Juventus, Real Madrid all staying in the same hotel, you know. And I'm not saying it's all sweetness and light, because it's not. But I'm just saying I feel like there's a little bit of like connectivity in terms of like, it's not our player, we don't own that player. Like that player can go anywhere. So we want to give them the best experience ever. But if they're not quite good enough, well, their story doesn't end there. So like, can they go and play somewhere else? You know? So I just feel like, obviously, I mean, Mauricio and I were talking about this earlier, but like the pay to play model kind of cuts that off a little bit. And I don't really know what the solution is there, but I feel like, you know, if there's a hybrid of that where we can work together a little bit more, I think that's healthy for everybody, you know, rather than it being territorial of like, these are our players, because they're not really your players. They're going to go on and play at colleges and whatnot, you know what I mean?
100%.
That's
Do
beautiful.
you guys have any other questions about BMP?
No.
All I wish is the best.
It's
definitely going up for you guys right now, and I just don't think.
Grows.
I don't think they really. There's something out there right now that's, you know, doing exactly what you're doing, especially for the youth here in Jacksonville. So just nothing but the best for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Before we transition to Women's World Cup, do you want to give out the handles for people to follow?
Oh yeah. Yes. So on Instagram, it's just at @bodymindperformance_. Facebook's the same, and Twitter's the same. So just at @bodymindperformance. So, and you can find us there.
Body Mind Performance _ Check it out. For sure.
Is there other platforms, like social media platforms, that you're also trying to?
Probably tap into TikTok, don't I?
That would probably help out a lot.
All my kids are telling me that, and I was like, okay.
Of course, the kids are like, let's do it.
I know. I'm approaching 30 next month. I'm like, am I too old for that? So yeah, I might have to get one of the kids to do that, or you guys. You guys can hit up my TikTok.
We'll do that. We'll do that as much as
possible. There you have it. Body Mind Performance _. Follow. You know.
Check it out.
Emily
Support.
If you're interested, for sure.
Appreciate it.
Now,
Women's World Cup.
You're going for USA, right?
Everyone keeps saying that now.
Really?
They're like literally got approved to be a citizen, and then they're like, so you support USA? And I was like, no. I've got a 14-month-old, he's only got England jerseys. And they were like, what? He's American. I was like, yeah.
There's a Ronan joke that we have with like me, Gabe, and Jalen, like, do you know what a kilometer is? But yeah, the Women's World Cup is happening right now. I think we're already, like I said, a weekend into it, and just wanted to know exactly how excited are you about this weekend from like previous World Cups that you've witnessed before?
Really excited. I mean, obviously the England team won the Euros, and that was like monumental. Like that whole. I think it's on Amazon. Like if anyone gets to watch the documentary of like the Lionesses, like it's just insane. So like that was like for me, was just like a very like emotional moment, and actually the whole country, not just me, but like my dad was crying. Like my dad just happened to be in America for the final, so like we got to watch it together. But like all my friends were just like, because, and even people that didn't really care for football, like literally were just like, this was amazing, because it really was the first time where it felt like it was just a normal Euros. Like it just felt like it was a normal tournament. It didn't care that it was like women, and it didn't start that way. Like I feel like at the beginning of that tournament, people were like, nah, it was the same kind of like thing. And then it was like, oh wait, actually this is kind of fun. Like, okay, and actually like the standards got way better, and you know, and it was just like, okay, actually like these guys can play, like kind of thing. So it was like the whole, I mean, the bars and everything, the standard like things that you just see, you know, on a tournament. And that's really the only time that I really miss England, is when the football's on. And I'm like, oh, and then my mum's like, thanks. like that's the only time, like, you know. But yeah, for the World Cup, like, so I feel like and I feel like now more countries are having that effect. Like you saw the New Zealand, like you know, she was so emotional, and it was just like she'd been working her whole life for that. And so I feel like it was like every country is kind of like doing the same. And like I think across the board, like people have realized that if you put it on and actually fund it, people are going to watch. You know, whereas it was kind of that whole supply and demand and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but with the Euros, the biggest thing that I noticed was the advertisement. So like pubs and everything would like say, hey, we're showing the Lionesses here. It's like, oh great, okay, so I know about it. Like if you have to look for it, no, people aren't going to do it, you know? Right, so if the accessibility is there, it's a no-brainer. Like and then you've seen like the numbers obviously in terms of the attendance. So I think that's really cool. And I think for me, I'm like almost a little bit jealous, isn't the right word, but I'm a bit envious of the kids coming up, because I'm just like, you guys don't realize how good you guys are. You know? Like,
because of me.
All because of me. No. Because like my idols, like, I mean, I had Kelly Smith as an idol, but like I couldn't watch her on a TV. Like, you know, like Steven Gerrard, David Beckham, I can tune in and watch them on a TV. But I couldn't watch her on a TV. I just knew she played for England, you know? And everyone of like my age group would have said, oh yeah, Kelly Smith's my favorite player, but never seen her play, you know? Whereas now all the girls like can and boys like turn on the TV and be like, okay, there, you know, there's Georgia Stanway or there's whatever, you know? So I think that part's like huge in terms of that.
I definitely think it's the advertising that's definitely boost up the women's soccer, football. Women's football in general.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, like the level has stepped up. Like the level is so competitive now, and you know, you got Spain, you know, with what's the name of the Ballon d'Or?
Alexia
Putellas, right?
Putellas,
right. You know, and you have all these stars like Megan Rapinoe, and that's now retiring, and there's so much advertising with that only for at least, you know, girls and boys in the U.S. to tune into that. But you know, kind of going back to England winning the Euro at Wembley, the stadium was sold out, packed. I mean, incredible story. I didn't know there was a documentary, so I'm definitely gonna go home and watch it.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I watched it on the plane when I was taking the kids over to England. I was like crying on the plane. So embarrassing.
Oh wow!
But no, it's really emotional.
How was it in the plane though? Like, were more people celebrating? Like, with you?
Oh no,
she's talking about
the documentary.
Oh, the documentary.
No, I watched the game at home.
Oh, okay.
Whilst all my friends were at Wembley. Yeah. So many of my friends were at Wembley, and I was like, I hate you right now.
Well, speaking of England, what do you think of their chances in this World Cup?
I don't know, because I feel like we're missing some key players. Like, I think we're definitely going to challenge for it, but like missing Leah Williamson and Beth Mead is a big, like, you know. So we looked a little shaky at the back the other day when I had to get up at 5 a.m. to watch that game.
I know.
So, we were looking at, I mean, Millie Bright's also not as fit as she was coming off an injury, so I just felt like it looked a little shaky at the back. So I don't know. I think but that's how we started in the Euros. So, I mean, we definitely had some luck on our first game, which you need a little bit at a tournament. So, the referee, I'm not sure. We'll see on the next one. I feel, you know, I just feel like the philosophy and the culture of that team is amazing. Like in terms of just the amount of thought and the detail that goes in. A good episode to listen to, if you guys are familiar with the High Performance podcast. They interview all these different like high performers around the world. But Jill Scott retired, and she was just talking about like how like Serena had just like planned out if people had COVID. Like they knew, like, so when it happened, when she came down with COVID during the Euros, like there was already a plan B in place. Like, and it was like she had thought of every single detail. So it was just like that advancement. So I feel like, you know, I feel like I trust in her. That she, you know what I mean? So we'll see. But I just think it will be, you know, a great tournament in terms of just for viewing. Obviously the timing's not great, but that's the only downside. But,
I think it's so pretty cool to hear the amount of people that I've heard personally still tune in and watch those games. Is pretty big. And to go back to like what you guys said about advertising, like social media is definitely helping out with like so many of that. I've even seen videos where they take like highlights from previous games, and then they'll, you know, put Mbappe, like AI Mbappe on, and then Antoine Griezmann and whatnot.
You saw that, right?
They play it back, and it's really women's team playing.
Right. That was it's like genius.
Insane.
Right.
So it's really cool to kind of see how it is that like quickly growing and growing and growing, and I just hope to see it continue.
100%.
So who do you have winning the whole thing?
Yeah, because you know who you want to win.
We know.
Who do you actually think is
the realistic answer?
Who's the final?
I honestly think Germany and USA could be the final. I think Germany are within a good shot of it. Yeah,
they won like 6-0 today, right?
Yeah, they did. I mean, obviously we beat them, but in the Euros. But I do think they look solid. So
definitely. I mean, who are you going for?
I said USA, man.
Yeah, I'm going for
Going three-peat.
USA.
I want to see the 3-peat.
Rah.
I'm going either for Spain or Brazil.
Okay.
They look really good. Brazil looked real nice today, and I think has Martha won the World Cup? No,
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I think she won an Olympics, but not the actual World Cup.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I just think, and you guys are playing against Denmark next, so. So I was going for Denmark. I'm sorry, but I think that pretty much wraps up this episode.
I think so.
I mean, unless you have any other questions.
No, we just genuinely appreciate your time and everything you're doing. Like we said, is just monumental for the community and the kids. So
I appreciate
really appreciate that. Yeah. So anytime we can help out with you as well with the BMP, we're always going to be here for you.
Perfect. Right, Thank you guys.
But appreciate you guys watching. Glad to be back with the boys and with Emily. But we'll try to be back next week to talk about a little bit more about the preseason and a little bit more about the Women's World Cup as well. Especially now we got a little bit more into it now. So please stay tuned for more information on that on our social media, World Class Football. And guys, thank you for watching.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
You guys.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.